In this video, I'd like to describe the new Circumambulation through the bounds module in Planet Dance. This has just been released on the 21st of June 2020. You can find the Circumambulations script in Horoscope, Classical, Circumambulation through the bounds. This brings up the circumambulation through the bounds list of directions. We're going to use William Burroughs's chart again as our illustration. I'd also like to introduce the Greek horoscope module. This is named Ed Greek Horoscope. If you open that up, you'll find you get a chart for William Burroughs presented in whole sign form with plenty of information to help you with Hellenistic or classical astrology. The technique of directing, in this case the ascendant, through the bounds or terms is one that has a long history. The method is based in this module on using primary directions of the ascendant, stepping through each of the bounds in sequence. And it's using the Ptolemaic key 1 degree per year. So what you have here in the Greek horoscope module is the chart wheel. You have the planetary positions and other positions in the zodiac on the inner wheel, and then on the outer wheel you have the bounds here, and we're going to be using the Egyptian bounds. In the Greek module you can change the Ptolemaic bounds, but the Circumambulations module only uses the Egyptian bounds. The outer wheel here, or the outer ring, is the decans or faces. You'll note that William Burroughs has his ascendant in 2720 of Aquarius. This is shown by the position here. When Burroughs was born, the ascendant was in the last term or bound of Aquarius, which is ruled, its ruler is Saturn. To cross-reference this with the list of circumambulations, you go to the window and see that indeed Burroughs was born into a bound or term ruled by Saturn, and that began on the 10th of July 1912 in terms of the date by primary direction. So that is prior to Burroughs's birthday by a couple of years. And you read from here the that bound begins in the 25th degree of Aquarius. So Burroughs's birth ascendant is located between or in the Saturn ruled bound here, and the first change of bound and bound lord was in mid-November 1915, when Burroughs was about 1 3/4 years old, when the ascendant by primary motion moved into Pisces. So you'll see what's happening is by primary motion the chart wheel is moving in this direction, and it brings each degree of the zodiac to the horizon by primary motion. And as the rate of primary motion when Burroughs was born means that it took 1 3/4 years for the passage of the ascendant by primary direction to finish its movement through the final bound of Aquarius and enter Pisces. And the Lord there is Venus. And you can see that the Egyptian bound, the first Egyptian bound of Pisces, is a long one, almost half the sign. In fact, well over, probably about 12 degrees. That period of time ended when the directed ascendant moved into this Jupiter ruled bound, the second bound at 12 degrees of Pisces, in July 1923, when Burroughs was just about 9.5 years old. And you can see that the circumambulation, the direction of the ascendant, moves through each bound in turn: the Jupiter ruled bound, the Mercury ruled bound, the Mars ruled bound, and then the final bound of Pisces, and in fact of the zodiac, is a Saturn ruled bound here. So Burroughs was born into a Saturn ruled bound, and in 1933 the directed ascendant moved into another Saturn ruled bound, this time at 28 degrees of Pisces. And interestingly, Burroughs left home and went to Harvard University at this time. You'll see then that the directed ascendant moves into Aries in June 1934, into Taurus in January 1953, Gemini in March 1975, and Cancer in February 2004. Burroughs actually died just before, on the 2nd of August 1997, just before the directed ascendant moved into this final Saturn ruled bound of Gemini. It's interesting just to look at these Saturn ruled periods of time. So for example, Saturn entered the final bound of Aries, which is again ruled by Saturn. This is quite common for the final bound of a sign to be ruled by either Mars or Saturn. In 1949, towards the end of 1949, and it was in 1951, September 1951, so in this period of time, when Burroughs claims he accidentally shot his wife at the time. So you have Burroughs born into a Saturn ruled bound, and interestingly he was born into a very privileged and wealthy family in St. Louis, Missouri. In the second passage of the directed ascendant through a Saturn ruled bound, he attended Harvard University. In the third passage of the ascendant through a Saturn ruled bound, he and his wife were living in Mexico, and he claims in a prank that he accidentally shot her and killed her. In this fourth Saturn ruled period of time, in the late 60s, Burroughs was living in London and was beginning to become an extremely famous literary individual, global literary star, if you like. But Burroughs, living in London was not, I don't think, an easy time for him. And then this fifth Saturn ruled bound in 1997, beginning in October 1997. Burroughs died just prior to the ascendant moving into that final bound of Gemini. So I'll leave you to explore this module, and you can use it in conjunction with the Hellenistic Astrology module, the Ed Greek horoscope module in the classical menu of Planet Dance.